This is our news, the weekend edition, and on the broadcast tonight, the latest on conch poisoning here in the capital. The health minister provides an update on the possible link between the treatment plant and conch poisoning cases. Plus, increased taxes for the rich. That's what one former member of parliament is suggesting governments do instead of taxing the poor. And several people arrested on drug charges.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Officials are still investigating a possible link between ongoing work at the Water and Sewage Malcolm Park treatment facility and a spate of conch poisoning cases at Potter's Key. Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands says not only is water testing being done at that site, but also across the country. Our Jasmine Brown reports.
Sands says while there has been talk about a possible link between the plant and conch poisoning cases, so far there has been no evidence to support that theory.
The public has raised questions about whether or not there's any connection between the works going on at the Malcolm Park primary treatment facility or the simple presence of that treatment facility and the proliferation of Vibrio in and around Potter's Key in particular. Let me start by saying that at this point we have no direct evidence that there's a relationship between either the presence, the activity of that plant, and or the mitigation or construction activity.
Earlier this month, Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resources Michael Pintard said officials are aware of this theory and noted that all possibilities would be addressed. Sands followed up on the concerns, telling our news that officials are on it and testing is ongoing across the Bahamas as they are determined to get to the bottom of it.
We are looking into that. We're trying to do sampling to determine whether there's a difference in the Vibrio concentration at Potter's Key around Malcolm Park as compared to Arawak Key. We have also obtained samples in Grand Bahama, I believe in Eleuthera, and I think Exuma, but in several Family Island sites to determine, as we expect, whether there are concentrations of Vibrio elsewhere. There should be no reason why they live in New Providence and nowhere else. As we get those results, we will be able to say definitively to the Bahamian public and to our visitors that we understand thoroughly the conditions which have led to this problem.
As of August 10th, cases of conch poisoning in the Bahamas had risen to 48. According to Health Ministry statistics, 8 of the confirmed cases were visitors to the Bahamas. Sands says the good news is the rise in cases appears to be slowing down.
We've had a number of visitors who have suffered documented Vibrio parahemolyticus poisoning. And while the concern exists also for locals, bear in mind that any event, any experience which is less than wonderful results in a negative perception of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Since the outbreak, health officials have visited vendors across New Providence and posted health advisories and tips, urging vendors and consumers to wash and store conch properly.
So we reiterate, please understand that no matter what you think of your preferred approach to conch management, wash it in fresh water. Now what you do with it after that, that's up to you. Now don't wash it in fresh water and then dip it back in seawater.
The government has said it is prepared to shut down those vendors who do not comply. Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
All right, thanks a lot, Jasmine. From the courts, 3 men accused of sexually assaulting a woman with a mental disorder have been refused bail. 29-year-old Dustin Stubbs of Melrose Avenue, South Beach, 35-year-old Tavan Ferguson of South Beach, and 20-year-old Anthony Mackey of Park Road off Soldier Road appeared before Magistrate Samuel McKinney yesterday, charged with unlawful sexual intercourse with a person suffering from a mental disorder. Prosecutors allege that the men raped the 22-year-old woman on August 11th. They were not required to enter pleas to the charge, as the matter will be transferred to the Supreme Court for trial. McKinney remanded the men to the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services until September 25th, when it is expected that the matter will be fast-tracked to the Supreme Court by a voluntary bill of indictment. Police on Acklins making a discovery of a quantity of suspected marijuana. Acting on information, officers went to the settlement of Salina Point, where they conducted a search of a bushy area and discovered the dangerous drugs. No information on the amount of drugs found and no arrests were made in connection with this find. Meantime, back here in the capital, 4 males and 1 female weren't so lucky after they were caught in possession of dangerous drugs. In the first incident, officers say they observed a male and a female allegedly selling drugs while they were on mobile patrol in the area of John Road. When officers conducted a search, they recovered a quantity of suspected marijuana. Then in the second incident, officers observed 3 males standing near a vehicle at the rear of a building on Apache Alley off Camp Road. Upon seeing police officers, the trio fled the scene through a tracked road. Officers pursued, however, the males made good their escape. Police recovered a quantity of suspected marijuana from the scene. In the final incident, officers say they observed 2 men in dark clothing believed to be selling dangerous drugs from an abandoned building in Mount Tabor Estates. When they conducted a search of the building, they discovered a quantity of suspected marijuana. Now, police say the suspects caught are expected to be arraigned in the magistrate's court next week. Well, one former MP who was the only member of his party to vote against value-added tax when it was introduced back in 2015 is calling for higher taxes on wealthy Bahamians. Gregory Moss, who represented the constituency of Marcos City from 2012 to 2017, says that is a regressive and unfair tax because it targets a person's consumption instead of their wealth. He says that while there was a time when income and capital gains taxes would have deferred foreign investment in the country, changes in global tax policy could mean the Bahamas is losing out on potential revenue.
There's no such thing as tax privacy anywhere in the world anymore. Everyone is getting taxed, everywhere. And for us to not tax the rich in our country only means that we are effectively allowing them to be taxed in their home jurisdictions when it comes to foreigners, in respect of income or capital gains, meaning increased value of property, that they earn here. So it's as if we are really taxing them and writing a check to Japan or to France or to Europe or to Canada or the US on their behalf. It's nonsense.
4 FNM MPs voted no to government's increase in value-added tax from 7.5% to 12%. Among them was Senate MP Reese Chipman, who called on government to tax the rich instead of the poor. Ultimately, though, Moss says legislators avoid taxing wealthy foreigners so wealthy Bahamians can enjoy those tax breaks as well.
We've made a decision as politicians that we prefer to exempt the rich foreigners in order to exempt ourselves than to tax equitably and reduce taxes on the majority of people in our country. In most countries, by the way, just so you know, in most countries, indirect taxes like VAT, like a sales tax, like a custom duty, indirect taxes account for about 30% of the revenue of the government. In our country, it accounts for almost all of the revenue of the government, which is the same as saying about 70% of the potential revenue in this country is untaxed.
And we will take our first break here, but still ahead tonight. Rev and Calo weather ensuring Bahamians are prepared this hurricane season. Stay tuned.